Okie dokie, everybody, here we go. General purpose warm-up number 5. This is 5 out of 6. We're going to take a little bit of time off of the more dynamic shoulder movements, the more practice-heavy club-style movements that you can do with the BAMF hammer, and move into something a little bit more conventional that you might have done with some dumbbells before, or maybe a kettlebell. Either way, it's an application of this piece of equipment in a method that you might be familiar with, but using the hammer is going to change things up a little bit. We're also going to get into one of my favorite warm-up movements, which is the 2 up, 2 down pulse. And that's a lot of fun, but that's not where we're going first. First up, all we're going to do is start rolling the wrist. So with about 4 inches between my hand and the head of the hammer, all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull back on my shoulder, tuck my elbow in nice and tight to the side of my body, and then from here we're going to lay this hammer down and just roll this around. Now, find the place where this is challenging, but in the beginning of the warm-up that might not work. So getting up close to the head, not a problem. We can roll this around. Get 5 or 6 reps in each direction with each hand, and as your strength increases, eventually you'll be able to walk down the handle to the point where you're doing wrist rolls down here at the pommel. The next thing we're going to move into is a Turkish get-up with the hammer. I like to do these 2 different ways. Way number 1 is I'm going to hold on to the handle, and I'm going to keep a gap. All right, let's get close. I'm going to keep a gap between my knuckles and the head of the hammer. I don't want it resting here. I want to make sure that I'm engaging my grip. And what I'm looking for is your conventional Turkish get-up. I start these from the top just because I usually have the hammer in my hand as opposed to being down on the ground. All right, but from here, all we're going to do is lunge back. Boom, I've got the hammer in my left hand, so the right knee lunges back, the right hand plant. I sit through, and then take this down to the ground, press it right back up, bring the hip off the ground. That arm comes through. Ordinarily, I'd be looking at the hammer, but I wouldn't want it to line because of the sun. And then stand tall. 4 or 5 of those on each side. We'll kind of get everything woken up. All right. Next up is this 2 up, 2 down pulse. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take a deadlift grip on my hammer, all right? But it's going to be slightly offset. And all I'm looking for here is I'm going to fold into a forward fold stretch, and then I'm going to sit into a nice deep squat, and when I sit into that squat, I'm going to raise the hammer up to shoulder high. So, drop down 1, 2 on the pulse, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now with these pulses, I'm not trying to drive deeper into a stretch. I'm not trying to gain more mobility and more flexibility. What I'm trying to do is just remind my body of what its mobility capacity is. Take those for 10 or 12. Your hips will feel really good, really open after that's done. Finally, last of 4, we're going to do a W pulse. Now, I take this one, and if you're standing on the ground, what we're going to do is, actually, I guess it's an M. Yeah, not a W, M, right? But we're going to draw an M with a pretty standard kettlebell style swing. So it's going to start on one side, it's going to go up in front of the left leg, between the legs, right leg, and then I'm going to take it back. And I'm going to keep the hammer in the same hand the whole time for 5 or 6 reps, twisting across the body when I get to the other side, when I've got my left hand when it gets to the right side of my body. So starting, tack, 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 twist. That's 1. Take that for 5. Up. And all we're doing is bouncing on the quad, not fully engaging, not fully folding into the kettlebell swing the way that you would for a typical swing, not squatting into it, just kind of pulsing on this. Your quads will really start to burn over a couple of reps. So getting 8 or 10 of those per side, and you're going to be in really good shape. Take that for 2 or 3 rounds. You should be ready to go for whatever specific warm-up you've got coming in for your workout. Happy hammering.